All right, welcome to Spoiler Kings. My name is Cramer, and today I'm doing a solo show by myself. So I'm going to talk about Our Flag Means Death. I'm going to do a review for this one real quick. It's a show that's out on HBO Max right now, so if you want to go watch it, go check it out there. But just a little quick rundown. It's basically about a man, Stede Bonnet, who wants more from his life, and then he winds up leaving everything behind: wife, his kids, money, a home, and he goes out to be a pirate, and he dubs himself the Gentleman Pirate. But when Stede runs into Blackbeard, who's played by Taika Waititi, then the real story begins. So just to jump into some of the good stuff that I like, the show was really, really funny. It takes what a pirate that a lot of people don't know about. Everyone knows about Blackbeard. Ed Teach is Blackbeard's real name by Taika, and Stede Bonnet is played by Rhys Darby, who is also New Zealand and has done other stuff with Taika Waititi. Rhys plays Stede, and he wants something a little different. So he winds up leaving everything behind, becomes a pirate, and dubs himself the Gentleman Pirate. But he gets his crew of these great actors. You know, he had the Joe Fry as Frenchie. Everyone knows Hodor. Christian Norn, I believe his name is. Wee John. You got Buttons, Lucius, who's like helps take his notes. Black Pete, which he was a great character at first. And then you have a bunch of other people as well. Nate Foxen, was the Swede. Samson Ko was Olawande, and Vico Ortiz plays Jim. So there's a bunch of other side characters too we'll get into a little bit. But yeah, this one just is kind of like takes a pirate, Stede, who no one really knows about, and kind of loosely based off his story, and does its own funny thing with it. And right off the bat, it's just such a great thing to see pirates not using their R and like walk the plank, matey, all that like kind of weird stuff. Right off the bat, you get this New Zealand guy with the New Zealand accent, who's very funny, kind of friendly accent, like, oh, hey there, that's more Canadian, but yeah, very New Zealand. So it's very non-threatening.
The last one is the scariest of them all. Instead of killing with weapons, he kills with kindness.
Oh, right. So you're the Gentleman Pirate then.
Well sussed.
And it kind of fits very well with Stede Bonnet, who's the Gentleman Pirate. But once you meet Blackbeard, Taika comes in, and he's got this big full beard, and he looks scary. He's in like leather, the sleeve is missing, got tattoos and stuff, knives and guns everywhere. And he comes on the ship, and everyone knows who he is, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Blackbeard!" And he's like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? How you doing? Hey, nice to meet you."
Hello, everyone. I'm Blackbeard.
Huge fan, sir. Huge.
And I thought that was like so funny. I was like, "This is gonna be a great show." Like right off the bat, with just how they're acting as pirates is not what you kind of used to. But Stede and Ed kind of mirror each other in this series. They're both really tired of their lives, which we already kind of know about Stede, but then we find out about Blackbeard that he's kind of over being this feared pirate, which is interesting. Something that you really don't think about. At least in this story, that's how he is, where he sees Stede. They like get onto his ship, and he goes into the captain's quarters, and there's books and a fireplace and all this clothes. And Blackbeard the entire time is like, this guy's crazy. He's a madman. He's like, who's gonna have an open fireplace on a wooden boat? So he was very intrigued in his lifestyle, like who would choose this? And then so they kind of do a little perfect strangers, kind of that whole trope kind of thing, where two opposites are going to help each other out, and they become like very good friends and more. But yeah, just the comedy between Rhys and Taika is great. They just, I don't know if because they've known each other for so long, or they're just that professional. And Taika is a genius, because I think he directed the first few episodes. But it was just so well done. And even so, you have their story of them kind of becoming better and also like teaching. So Ed is like kind of over being this pirate and wants to be something different, something new. He's over being at the first look of him, people go running and they're scared, and he's like, there's not a challenge anymore, I think is what he says. And then Stede wants something else. So he wants to be a pirate and wants to put that away. So they make a pact to teach each other the ways of one another. So Blackbeard wants to become a wealthy nobleman kind of style, and Stede wants to become a pirate. So and all that happens, but there's a lot of going on with the crew of the Revenge, which is Stede's ship's name. And Stede's, we have Jim, you find out, is hiding. They had some issues. They really don't. I don't remember too much of it. But they had issues of their parents getting killed, and they want to get revenge, basically. So in the show, Jim is a woman, but dressed up as a man to kind of hide that whole ordeal. And I think that's something like they tackled very well, where it's just like no one on the ship cared. Like no one on the ship cared. Where Jim was just like kind of hiding, like afraid to let themselves be seen in a certain light. So they kind of like try to blend in. But once they got figured out and stuff like that, like the rest of the crew is like, so what is going on? And then Jim was like, just keep calling me Jim. We all know it, and they're like, okay, cool. Also, Jim is like a badass, probably the most badass person on that ship. They know how to fight. They know how to use a knife, multiple languages. I mean, Jim is just a complete badass. So like, obviously everyone respects Jim on the boat. But then you have Olawande, who is kind of in love with Jim and knows the secret. So there's that whole thing that, between them two. But then you also have Frenchie, who's he doesn't have too much of a story, but him and Wee John, which is Hodor. Everyone knows Hodor, which he's great in the show because he's so big, and he's just so non-threatening, but like also physically threatening because of his size. So his character was really good. But him and Frenchie are kind of good friends and stuff like that. But you have Buttons, who's the guy who steers the boat. He's kind of like weird, believes in like moon and witches and hexes and stuff like that. And then we got Lucius, who is the person who writes everything down. And Black Pete was great. He's the one who used to work for Blackbeard, and he has this lisp, and it's very like he's trying to be a badass, but no one's taking him seriously, and he has all these like stories that just kind of are funny. So, but yeah, so that's all Stede's crew. Oh, and then the Swede, obviously. Nate Foxen is the Swede, and he talks with this like really bad Swedish accent. Is kind of like stereotypical, and it was very funny. But the crew together is just they're so funny. Like right in the first episode, they have to make a flag to represent them being pirates. Like, oh, Blackbeard has a flag, every pirate has a flag, and their flags are the funniest things. They do like a really crappy skeleton, and the best one was just a black cat silhouette. And it's so funny. And they're like pirates sitting on the deck, kind of like doing arts and crafts kind of stuff. And it's so funny. Like it's very different from how you see like other pirates that we've always seen on TV and movies and stuff like that. I mean, the most different would have been Johnny Depp's pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean, but these guys are completely different. Even the badass ones are very different. But then we get Taika once he comes in, and his main right hand man is Izzy, who is kind of he's a very unique character as the show goes on, and he gets into Taika's head, Captain Blackbeard's head, on like, hey, we need to kill this guy, blah blah blah. But meanwhile, there's this whole story. Everything happens. I don't want to get into too many spoilers. But Stede and Blackbeard really becoming more than just like buddies teaching each other. They do wind up like falling in love with each other. And I know that sounds like weird, like Blackbeard, like, yeah, it's really a good story. And then there's a lot of stuff in between. There's Leslie Jones is in it. Fred Armisen is in it, and they Spanish Jackie, who Leslie Jones is. So they get into all these other like issues that they're getting into with obviously Blackbeard. A great part that I enjoyed was they find an invitation to a fancy party, and Taika's like, I want to do it because he wants to be a fancy man. And so they wind up getting the all the white face paint that you kind of like see in like old English kind of fancy parties, and they go onto this like nice English boat. Nick Kroll and Christian Scholl, who I did not expect to see in the show, and they play these two rich fancy married couple, and it's just so funny. And Taika Blackbeard is like at one point gets so upset with them, and he's like, I'm gonna kill them all, I'm gonna kill them all. But also like Stede was telling him like, listen, like you hurt people with your guns and your knives and your violence. Rich people hurt each other's with underhanded comments and passive aggression, so it's a very different world, where Stede was kind of always an outcast even in his own world, where Blackbeard he fit in really quick because he was so himself. He's just like, oh yeah, I've done this, I've done that, and people kind of like thought it was a joke almost, until he got a little serious and he didn't know the forks and whatnot, and kind of made a fool of himself, and they started doing passive aggressive comments to Blackbeard, and he did not take it happy. But Stede came in and saved the day, and underhanded comments to everybody, and this craziness happened. But yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite funniest scenes with them together. But them training together was great, stuff like that. But some of the bad stuff I didn't care for was it's not that I it was bad, it was just it was annoying, was Izzy, because Izzy is the evil devil kind of on Blackbeard's shoulder, telling him like, oh, you need to do this, you need to be Blackbeard, you need to be this bad man. So Izzy was kind of annoying, and also his voice. He had this very like raspy whisper voice that was kind of like annoying, but it was still pretty well done. Yeah, and then Ivan, who was Goose Khan, was Ivan. They're part of the crew, and yeah, they didn't play too much. He had two other crew members. They really barely did anything. But Izzy Hands was the right hand man. But yeah, without going too much into details with spoilers, yeah, I mean, there's a big twist ending at the end, with stuff like that. But one thing I know that does get a lot of heat for this show is the big queer and gay kind of representation in it. Was a lot of people obviously don't like it. They're like, oh, it's supposed to be pirates. But I'm like, it's funny, and it fits, and it's good. And there's people kissing and stuff like that. It was Will Arnett plays Calico Jack, I believe his name was, and he's kind of that toxic ex-boyfriend in a relationship, and he kind of comes back into picture and starts doing all these things with Blackbeard, and makes Stede feel a little uncomfortable, and it was just very it was a good like dynamic of like, oh, Blackbeard wants to be different, but then as soon as like somebody fun from his past comes back, he's like, oh yeah, hey, we can have the fun too. So like Blackbeard has to make a choice and stuff like that. And obviously, it's does he stick around and party with his old buddy, or does he, do something more meaningful with Stede? So we get into a lot of that. Black Pete and Lucius, they which very unexpectedly they wind up like kind of having a relationship as well, which is it fits, especially with Black Pete, just because how badass he was trying to be, and then he's also like falling in love with Lucius. But let me get into our official rating. So here on the Spoiler Kings, we do everything, we rate everything 3 ways: a now, later, and never. Now means you need to watch it right now, drop what you're doing, go watch it, it's that good. Later means you can watch it in a few weeks, watch it while you're doing dishes or cleaning the house, put it in the background. And never means don't even waste your time, just skip it, it's not worth it. So for me, I'm gonna rate this one a now, because this one definitely, like, the funniness, just how everything was so well put together, how they are pirates and stuff like that, but it's also relatable into like, like you're stuck in your life and you kind of went out, and then once you get out, you kind of are not sure what to do, and and at one point do you get pulled back in? Do you just go further deep, into this new life? And this kind of explores a lot of that part of it as well. Also, for anybody who's in the LGBT community, this is like super important. It's like even like Vico Ortiz is playing a non-binary pirate, which is with Jim. So that's very different as well. Stuff like that. And even Jim kind of falls for Alawade. You have just Lucius and Black Pete. So there's a lot of different relationships. There's also Stede and his wife Mary that they dig into a little bit like that, and his kids, for a little bit. So it definitely kind of like hits on, like, if you can't relate to one thing, you can still relate to other things. I always find, stuff like that very important. And also there's a pet seagull, I guess, in it. And when you start caring about a seagull, not even a dog or a cat, like a normal traditional pet, a seagull, then like, all right, this show is getting you invested when you care about a seagull. But all the relationships are so well done, and kind of like what you want, and the whole time you're like, oh yes, get together, or like, oh no, don't do this, and you're just very confident in your feelings on some of these relationships with a lot of these people. But I say go watch it now. It's just, and if none of that relates to you, just the sheer comedy is funny. Between Taika knows how to deliver lines, Rhys Darby is a comedian as well. Them together like are just funny. They do funny stuff, and that alone, if you're not into any of the other stuff, that alone is probably worth watching it. But that's my opinion. I say go watch it right now. By the end of it, you will be wanting, like, I need season 2. When are they gonna do season 2? And then also on Rotten Tomatoes, we have the tomato meter, which is your critics, 91%, and the average audience score is 95. That is crazy that they're both in the 90s and they're that high. I think it's really well done. It puts you in after that first episode, you're like, I want more. And then the more you watch, you're just the more addicted to the show you start getting. So go check it out. But that's it for my solo review of Our Flag Means Death. It just came out this year, so it's not too old. It's maybe out a month or so already. Go watch it. Go check it out. 9 episodes. I guarantee you're going to binge it, and you're going to have a good time with it. But that's it for me from the Spoiler Kings. Make sure you go check out some of our other videos on the channel. We do weekly reviews of all the box office movies that come out the weekend, and we do all the TV reviews on Wednesdays with myself and Brian, where we do Halo, Moon Knight, all the other like streaming TV shows that are coming out and stuff like that. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that like button if you find this review to be helpful. And let me know how you guys like Our Flag Means Death. Were you just kind of not into it for whatever reason? Were you really into it? Was it really funny? Did you like the representation of Blackbeard and what they did with this kind of badass pirate, that what they did with it? Let me know. Leave a comment, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But thank you guys, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.